Minerals, Mr. Stauber. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all the witnesses. I want to thank you all for your testimony. I'd like to start by noting that the Nonpartisan Energy Information Institute projects significant increases in global and oil and gas demand for the next 5 years. Ms. Scamma, it's great to see you, and thank you once again for joining us today. The importance of your membership to American energy security is not lost on me. However, as you stated so clearly in your testimony, we need to update our broken permitting process so your producers can produce. Rolling back the 2020 NEPA rule was a mistake. Could you elaborate a little more on how agencies focusing on hypothetical project impacts isn't grounded in reality, and how harmful that rule has been to your membership and to Americans nationwide?
Thank you for the question. And I would agree with Mr. Sandberg. Groups are using NEPA to slow down wind and solar projects as well. We saw with the 2020 rules just sensible reforms to put appropriate page limits and time limits and focus NEPA on the actual impacts at hand. Because, I agree with Ms. Johnson. We want communities to be involved. The NEPA process has public comment already baked into it. It's part of the process. But what was happening is NEPA is taking 5, 10, 15 years for roads, bridges.
20 sometimes in a mining community in mine. Go ahead.
Yep. But even for roads, like they're adding costs for communities all across the country and taking 10 years to build a road to do NEPA, because often the agencies are requiring the project proponent to do basically research projects. So instead of actually focusing on the impacts from the project, they have to do hypothetical studies on, cumulative impacts on other projects together with the project at hand. So they have to consider all these things that are far related. We're getting requirements to do greenhouse gas analysis, not from the project, but all down the line to try to imagine what the end user is going to do with that oil or natural gas. So hypothetical research far beyond the impacts of the project at hand, and certainly far beyond the impacts of the communities at hand.
Thank you very much. Mr. Melito, thank you again for joining us. We understand and appreciate the work your membership does for our nation. As you noted, a barrel of oil from the Gulf accounts for half the emissions of oil developed abroad. However, this administration only offered 2 offshore lease sales, jacked up the royalty to disincentivize participation, and then didn't defend it in court. If global demand is rising for oil and your membership provides a smaller emissions profile, what do you think a 5-year plan should look like that meets global demand challenges with the most efficient development in the world?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the question. And a lot of arguments are made that our industry, we have enough leases, but those arguments really ignore the fundamental realities of the energy business. Whether it's oil and gas, solar, wind, you need acreage to develop the resource. The more acreage, the more energy you can produce. And to get acreage, you need leasing. And offshore is a region that is still an exploratory business. So when you get a lease, there is absolutely no guarantee that it's going to produce oil or natural gas. Companies spend between $100 and $200 million to determine whether or not a particular lease even has oil and gas. And most times, they come up empty. So having a predictable, regularly scheduled plan for leasing is vitally important. We have an opportunity to go from the 1.8 million barrels today we're producing. The estimates are if we have continued leasing and continued permitting, we get to 2.4 million barrels. We also can go from 370,000 jobs to 430,000 jobs. But to do that, we should have at least 2 lease sales per year in the Gulf of Mexico. That will also help out offshore wind because under the IRA, you need offshore oil and gas leasing to issue the wind leases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quickly, Mr. Sandberg, thanks for joining us. Yes or no? Does American Clean Power understand the necessity and benefits of domestic mining to your industry? And does American Clean Power support domestic mining?
Thank you for the question. We support the reshoring of supply chain, and a part of that we think is continuing exploration for critical minerals domestically.
So you support domestic mining? Is that what you said?
We support the reshoring of the supply chain.
That's all you got.
Do you support domestic mining or not? Do you support mining in Minnesota or not?
We support the mining of critical minerals in the U.S. to prevent
Thank you.
supply
You and I
chain
are going to
back
have a
the
great
US.
conversation. That's all you, I appreciate the answer because I had to actually pull it out of you, and that's kind of
The gentleman,
concerning, but thank you very much.
gentleman's